Some studies have found that 50% or more of rural America lacks access to a broadband connection. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law provides $65 billion for high-speed broadband. Nicol Turner Lee is a senior fellow in governance studies and the director of the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. Nicol, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Can you start by defining what is digital divide?
You know, the digital divide is a concept that I think we're all familiar with, and the pandemic really exposed just how severe it was. When we think about the digital divide, historically, we've thought about the haves and the have-nots in the information economy. Today, we're talking about the digital divide and people who are not connected and their inability to connect to school resources, education, employment benefits. This digital divide is just so much different than it's ever been because these are important pathways to success.
How did this become such an issue and why has it persisted?
You know, we've had presidential administrations work on this for a variety of decades. I mean, we're not talking about this happening during the pandemic. The challenge has been technology has also progressed in ways that we can't keep up as policymakers. So as a result, we're seeing a move from an analog, an inline economy to one that's in person is no longer relevant. People have to go online to do a variety of things, from shopping and working and learning. And so now we're at this stage where we have to make sense of this because we're not going back when it comes to technological innovation.
What data do state and local governments actually have about who has access and who doesn't?
Not enough. I mean, unfortunately, we're still in the process as a country in creating a national broadband map. So we still have to go out there and see where does access exist, in what speeds, in what capacities, who are subscribing to those data assets. And then we have to learn a little bit more about the people who are connected. I mean, the research that I do at the Brookings Institution is suggesting that we just don't have a hyper-local approach to who is affected by not being connected to the internet.
How would you collect that kind of data? Because there's also not just, the issue of broadband access at home. There might be access at the library, which might not help you when you need something in the middle of the night.
I know, and that's the challenge. What we saw during COVID is libraries and schools were closed and businesses were closed, so you had to have an in-home connection. The problem is, until we collect the right data that actually suggests who's connected where. I mean, we did a report where we're finding people in rural America are not as connected as they should be, and we've known that for decades. The problem is, the more poor you are, the less educated you are, the older you are, it just becomes increasingly difficult to be able to have the connection that you need to participate.
You cite an Ipsos poll in your report that says most people without broadband access believe it's the federal government's responsibility to provide it.
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, and I'm writing a book about this, the federal government has always come in and really helped to jumpstart the broadband marketplace. I mean, on the capital investment side, companies have done that clearly, right? We would not be talking about the companies that we rely upon for our internet service. But we really need the federal government now to come in and help the least connected. I call them digitally invisible people. They're people that we think are connected because we may see them on the metro with a phone, we may encounter them online via email, but they're not having the connectivity needed to apply for a job, to educate themselves, to be connected to family and friends. It is incumbent upon us and our government to make sure we're globally competitive. And that means closing the digital divide is everybody's concern.
All right, so how do you do that, Nicol? Because, the federal government can try to incentivize private companies, but if there's no profit in covering a rural area, they're not going to do it.
And that's the challenge. I mean, rural areas, they not only have the topography challenges, right, but they have the challenge of rural poverty. I mean, it's real. 5 million people in this country live in rural America. 12 million or 5 million people are subjected to poverty. That's a problem because we have these systemic inequalities that are keeping them pretty much centrally located. I think we're at a start. The infrastructure bill by the Biden-Harris administration is one step in a down payment on broadband connectivity. We need states and localities to do some data mapping, understand who you're serving so we get to those people first. And we need an all-hands-on-deck strategy. This is not just the private sector. This involves community-based organizations, local churches. It involves schools and libraries, communities coming together to ensure that their communities are not left behind.
All right, so let's talk about how. What are your recommendations for how the infrastructure law can be executed in a way that will enhance broadband access?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is that they've started the process of giving out money and building capacity in local states and localities. The challenge is we need data, right? We need to be able to understand at the onset what metrics and data is available to states and localities to properly distribute these monies. I think the second thing that we need is we need a series of, in all honesty, pragmatic town halls. Get local people to a town hall, not the ones just that are online because people don't have access, but really gauge the interests of what people need. We did that in our recent report on rural broadband development. I think the third thing is that we need to continuously push ourselves on why we're doing this. I think over the years, we've seen the Clinton-Gore administration, we've seen the Obama administration, we see now Biden-Harris administration putting the digital divide first because they see it as a must-have. But really, in this country, it's more than a must-have. It's a requirement for first-class digital citizenship. If we're going to do this right, we need policy to really be hyper-local while it's also solving big problems.
And just briefly, you've published one of 4 reports.
Yes.
What are you going to be looking at in those next reports?
We're concerned. Rural populations experience a lot of problems, and we know that we've not been able to put all of the money to rural communities and solve it to date. It's been decades, and we still have a rural divide. And so what we're trying to do in each report, the first one being on who people think is accountable for closing the divide, and we're finding it's the federal government, is getting deeper. How are rural people accessing the internet through anchor institutions and local organizations? They don't have the things that we have at home. They can't get it sometimes. And then our real basic concern of this report is getting to people who are people of color, extremely poor people, who we feel at the Brookings Institution are going to be left behind in this tranche of down payment simply because we don't know what their circumstances are. And so we've been using this polling as an opportunity to go deeper.
Thank you so much, Nicol, for coming on the program.
Oh, thank you so much for allowing me to talk about this.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.